Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Steven Universe. That's what I've decided to name it this week, Chris.
Nice, good.
The nameless Steven Universe audio log that keeps getting different and increasingly weird.
Stop doing that. If these are all strapped together, just every week, people are going to be like, "Look, we know you've not decided on a name." Like
at this point, I think we've established that we're not going to be strapping them together.
Okay.
So this week's episode.
Explaining it then.
This week's episode was Serious Steven, which is an episode about basically Steven's hoping for more respect and more fair treatment with the gems. He wants to come along on their missions, but he realizes he has to treat these things seriously. So he there's this running joke of activate Serious Steven, and he tries to be all serious and not basically a child, which is what he is. They end up in like a sort of a gem-built maze. They're trying to retrieve a gem of some sort for some reason. It's all very vague, but it puts Steven sort of puts him in sharp relief. A reminder of a mistake he'd made earlier, a few weeks before, where he'd had a bunch of confidence and been like, "I'll be fine," and it turned out not great at all. So it's about him getting over that and learning to like trust himself a little bit. So yeah, they sort of end up in like a gem maze, and Steven helps them get out. What'd you think, Chris? As always, I'm so eager. Like on Fringe Observers, I just blare in. I'm just like, my opinion, like straight away. But on the Steven Universe one, mate, I gotta know. What'd you think?
Well, I'm going to disappoint you because if it was an ice cream, it would be vanilla. Like I just found it was fine. Like it wasn't as offensive as cat fingers. It wasn't anywhere near as good.
Can we offensive?
Yeah, offensive to my ears, my eyes, anyone who's ever tried to entertain before.
Your sense of taste.
Cats. Just offensive to everyone. But we're not here to shit on cat fingers. It was fine. Genuinely, like I laughed a little bit. Like I thought it was a bit random at first when they went 2 weeks earlier. But I think either you tired or eager to get to my opinion. But you describing it with like, and then it was a maze. Like that for me sums up the episode. Yeah. The manner in which you recapped it perfectly summarizes the episode. It's fine. It's not awful. It's not by any means the best. It's not a particularly interesting situation. And I think oddly that's because they started in the middle of it. Like, they're flying down and stuff and you're like, oh, we're here, we're going. But then nothing really happens for ages. And so it's like, it's this action beat that then, just, it might as well have started with him getting some strawberries or some shit like that, like it usually does. And yeah, I liked Activate Steven, Serious Steven, but partly because I could imagine you really liking it.
Wait,
and like
you enjoyed a joke by proxy. You laughed at it.
Not even
thinking
but
about the
just
fact
like,
I would laugh at it.
Just like, I bet Dan enjoyed that. Like I could hear you now, just like, and then he's like, activate. He's like, yeah, like he's a robot. It was.
Did you not think it was sweet at the end though when Garnet said it? Do you not think that's a great payoff?
When she's like, it's regular Steven.
No.
Or when she actually says activate.
Yeah, when she says activate, that's a great payoff. So the whole way through he's going, activate Serious Steven, and towards the end, she's like, activate Steven, and throws him at the gem. I thought that was pretty funny. No?
It's a decent payoff. It's not Hamlet's uncle dying, but it's, it's a payoff.
I don't think the show
and don't get me wrong, I'm not looking for Hamlet's uncle dying.
Jesus Christ. I don't have the strength. We need to stop doing these. This is funny, but I'm lost. Don't get me wrong. I know. I agree. I agree with most.
Yeah, I was
going to
say this is the thing. I'm sounding very negative, but I know you have to agree because there's nothing particularly in this episode to grab hold onto.
No, this is one of those episodes that is inoffensive in that, and I'm borrowing your phrasing, in that it is competently put together. You get a couple of little character stuff that's nothing deep, but surface stuff that's nice to know. Like it's nice to see Garnet giving Stephen the chance, and it's also the dynamic. In fact, the dynamic of those three and how they treat Stephen at this stage is perfectly summed up in one very clever scene. Amethyst just picks him up and goes to charge into battle. Pearl grabs him from her and pats him on the head in a really patronizing way, like, no, we'll wait here. And then Garnet takes him and lets him walk into danger with her. Like that, in a very clever 10-15 second scene, which also has a few good jokes, because I love when he starts to say, activate Serious Steven, he's still being held in a very childlike way by Pearl. He's like, Pearl, I don't think it works unless I'm standing. And she has to like put him down like a baby. It's brilliant. So in that scene, which also has a good joke in it, you get such an interesting look at how these gems are reacting to Steven at this stage and how they are treating him at this stage. Pearl is obviously mothering him. Amethyst, the purple one for you, Chris. She's, she's just doesn't care. Like she's just like, woo, fun. Like, she doesn't give a damn. And then Garnet's trying to be supportive. She wants to go with him to protect him, but she knows it's time for him to start doing this stuff on his own. So there's a lot of stuff there in that alone that's worth it. Then there is a lot of sort of faff around that moment, which is some funny, some not great. But the ultimately the premise, my biggest flaw in this episode, the thing that bothers me the most is, in the other episodes, you got a sense of the goal of the mission. So, like, in Cheeseburger Backpack, as frivolous as parts of that episode may seem, you understood from Pearl's reactions that palace was important to Pearl. You don't know how or why, but you know it's an important place that she deems to have been. She has a great respect for it and its heritage and its history. And the fact it was in such disrepair clearly bothered her. So there were stakes. You were like,
yes, but I would also argue not to talk about another episode, another example of how vanilla this one is. But I didn't get that as much because I think if you're watching it for the first time, you could view all of that stuff as a character thing. She could just like things in order. She could be a bit Monica from Friends.
Well, she is. I mean, she is a little bit Monica from Friends. I mean,
yeah.
In that sense,
that's what I'm saying. So I don't think anyone that's not. I think if you've not watched the show, I don't know if it's as deep.
But even then, you still understand.
Yes, your point is your point.
I'll phrase it differently. I'll even remove that part of the point. In Cheeseburger Backpack, they are going to that thing because it's going to collapse into the sea when the moon hits a certain point, unless they get that object into that spire. In this episode, what are they trying to achieve?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I've seen every episode forward from this. It is weirdly vague, this one, and it's not like the show to do that.
And continuing that kind of what's the point, Fred? I know the flashback links back, and you explained how in your flashback, and I got that watching it. But when it happens, it feels a little bit Family Guy.
What, when it suddenly cuts to the teacup?
Just randomly cuts to an earlier because it just reads like a joke. Like because they play it with the this is going to be intense, and then they do this is going to be intense. I read that as she can't judge what's intense and what's not until the ending.
I see.
Because I think it plays like that.
Yeah, I can understand that. I think how I feel about it when it all plays out is that it's her mothering of Stephen that's the link there.
But in the end, in that immediate, this is gonna be intense. This is gonna be intense. Cut to a teacup ride.
Yeah, gotcha.
It plays like that's the game.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, no, that makes sense, and I think that it's also less clear here that I could even though I got what they were getting at, which is the parallel is Stephen wanted to be ready to be treated like a grown up, to be this tall to ride the ride, and he also wanted to be treated like a grown-up and taken on these gem adventures, and they've drawn a parallel there. But I wonder, having seen it again now for the second, third, fourth, whatever time, actually, these first sort of handful of episodes I've seen a bunch, actually, to be honest with you. I'm very familiar with these first ones particularly. Some of the more recent ones I've only seen once or twice. So it'll be interesting when we get further into this, whether I'm remembering them as well. But with this one, I think I could see somebody watching this and not drawing that parallel and coming out going, what was the teacup stuff about? He broke a teacup ride? Right? Like, what? Like,
yeah, like I say, I got it, but it was just, it just, in an episode that didn't follow the usual setup bit of banter, and now we're into it, it launched into it a bit quicker, and so therefore that just felt out of place. It was like they put the intro bantery bit with the postman in the middle of the episode.
Right, yeah, gotcha. So yeah, I think on the whole, this is definitely not as. I remember this run of episodes being really good, but I'm looking at the next one as well and going, that one's good, but ultimately, actually no, I think that I like the next one. No, I do like the next one. There's an element of it that I think you're going to not like, but I think on the whole, the next episode is a strong one.
I look forward to that.
and then we get into a really good run, in my opinion. Like, I mean, dear Lord, I'm looking at the list. Giant Woman, episode 12. So Many Birthdays, episode 13. Lars and the Cool Kids, 14. Onion Trade, which is 15. And Stephen the Swordfighter are all, in my opinion, strong episodes. So we're in for.
I think the difficulty is that I think this is kind of funnier when I'm miserable. So,
you want to not like them?
No, I do want to. No, because I mean, that's a waste of my life if I don't like them. So I do genuinely want to like them.
We like it's a thing. We're doing it. Like, it's like we review stuff on Nothing But Static, our full television podcast, and you don't like those, and that's also equally funny.
That was me playing the melancholy a bit too far. It's not a waste of my life. We get to do the Steven Universe podcast for our lovely peeps.
Yeah.
Well, they're lovely to you, no doubt. But I imagine if it's because you wouldn't listen to a podcast about a show unless you were a diehard fan. So I imagine they don't like me much. But
well, I think anybody who watches a lot of TV would struggle to. They might not feel like it's as big a problem as you. Like, I don't think it's as big a problem. Like, I'm okay to just have the show be silly for 10 minutes, because it is just 10 minutes. But I get that when you start analysing it, I think anyone analysing this episode would struggle to disagree with the crux of your point. Maybe some of the minutiae, they might go, well, maybe, but there's this and there's that. But like the reality is, what you're essentially saying is, there's nothing particularly strong about this episode. There's nothing particularly weak about this episode, and on top of that, doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah.
And I would kind of agree with that, because I think ultimately we're at a point where there was no real stake set up. There was no real clear objective for me to care about them succeeding or failing in. I guess they got that gem thing. That was the objective, I think. I will say we got a nice glimpse at the she talked about that it used to be a sort of a gem battlefield. What did you think to that? Did you take anything from that?
No, not really. I just assumed it was context, historical stuff that I would find out about at some point.
I mean, that's true. Any theories though? Anything?
I think the gems probably battled there. Other than that, I've got no.
Did you not think the scale of it suggested that? Okay, so I'll tell you what I got from this episode that made me really excited from that scene specifically. When I first watched this episode, it made me realize the scale, because to me the gems seem like these three creatures that live in this little beach city, and the rest of the world is as is, except for these monster things that they seem to fight. And this was the first time that the scale and also the length of time hit me. They have clearly been around for a while, because that's a
good point. I didn't think about that, because I've always viewed it as so about the town and them. Mm-hmm. I didn't even sort of put that conceive to put that in a wider context.
Yeah, and not just that, but the time frame. that this stuff is ancient, genuinely ancient. Like the temple that they went into, the maze thing, that had these carvings on it of, some stuff that's since been explained, which is really cool, by the way. To see those carvings is awesome every time I see them. I mean, they get reposted on the Steven Universe subreddit like every 10 minutes because so many bits of those carvings has become relevant later on. But the carvings when they went inside of that were really cool to see, because they sort of like, they hint at the past that we've yet to learn about. And then just looking at how overgrown it all is, you go, man, this is clearly, we're talking dozens, if not hundreds of years. How long have they been here? It's hard to say. Do they age like humans? Do we, I remember when I first watched it, having a lot of questions following this episode, but also feeling like it opened my eyes to the fact that there's a lot more to what's going on than I'm aware of. And looking, and it made me, this is the episode I think that made me start looking more closely at what was happening. I think at a certain point I was treating it like a silly kids show. And then this is one of those points in which I sort of turned around to realize that the writers are actually taking this a lot seriouser than you would imagine, and they really do have a lot of stuff going on that they're figuring out and hinting at and leading us towards.
Maybe I'm looking at that less because I'm not surprised by it, because I know that's coming, because we wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't. Do you know what I mean? You've said that comes, so maybe that's why I'm not taking note of that as much, because
you're in a relaxed position of waiting for the answers.
That to happen.
Gotcha.
Well, I'm just expecting it to happen at some point.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's interesting. So yeah. So I think that's pretty. I think we've rambled long enough.
Yeah,
Chris. I think we've put people through enough of this.
It's been a solid.
Yeah. solid 15 minutes.
All good.
Yeah. I appreciate that. So thanks everyone for listening. Once again, this week we took the series. Next week we are talking about Tiger Millionaire. So do come back and we'll chat about that.